The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. To this growing show dedicated to the finest food and fibre in the world from beautiful New Zealand, I'd love to say welcome. I'm your host Sarah Perriam, and on behalf of my producer and I would like to say it is our privilege to have been gracing, can I say gracing, Joel? It hasn't really been all that graceful. Sarah's country the whole way along. No, hang on, let's have a go. It's been our privilege to have you choose to join us. There you go, live or fill your ears on demand whilst you are out and about. For 10 weeks now, would you believe it? Do you think you'll still be here on our 10-year anniversary, Joel?
We'll see.
You'd be questioning your life choices if you're still here working for me in 10 years, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, you know, it's been fun, but 10 years is a long time.
I know, and it'll be my taste in music that will drive you to the international airport. Yeah. Actually, Joel, I'd like to introduce you to a range of Kiwi music tonight. And in particular, while you're here, we can't play any on the show, as we learned, Joel. The live stream will pause, as we've found out. Now, amongst the very important topics tonight on Sarah's Country, I want to celebrate a very special part of Sarah's Country, which is music. And for those of you who know me, I actually like a range of music genres, not just country music. Now, the New Zealand music scene has been extremely struggling despite our return to level 1 in celebration today. Now, it's got me thinking about what a great opportunity to have a renaissance of our love of supporting local acts. We've had an absolute flood of international acts taking the stage away from our local acts. So tonight I want to know if I could wave my magic wand and send you tickets to just one New Zealand artist concert right now, this weekend, what would it be? You never know, I might actually have some tickets here for you. So get into those comments. I want to know. If you're watching live with us, tell us, who is your favourite New Zealand artist of all time? That could be alive or dead. I just want to see who you've seen live that you absolutely love, or who you would love to see live that you haven't seen. We absolutely love live music in our family. And as it's nearing to Father Bobby's 60th next week, hence, I've got to tell you, we won't be here next week, and the reason why. I'll be collecting a lot of photos, and a lot are at concerts. Would you believe it? My dad, Bob, is into dub and roots. He likes a bit of D-dub, 660, Fly My Pretties. I grew up with Kiwi rock. She had the Feelers. They are among my New Zealand favourites. Joel, you filmed at a very large New Zealand music festival known as Rhythm and Vines. Mm-hmm. You, of course, have some favourite Kiwi musicians by now.
I could name maybe one or two, but they were pretty good. R&B was a good time. Dave Dobbin was the one that really stood out, surprisingly, which, that was good fun.
Did everybody drink every time he sung the word loyal?
Yeah, I wondered why everyone was stumbling around by the end of that song. That must have been it. Yeah, that's a good Kiwi favourite drinking game. Dave Dobbin is an absolute legend. There is a lot of them. I would love to celebrate throughout the show. Well, I've got your comments here live, and let's rejoice and celebrate New Zealand music. Sarah's Country is your fix on food and farming as well. So let me tell you what we've got on the menu tonight. She believes this government is hell-bent on a particular outcome, a willingness to fund whatever resources are needed to get it, and an inability to foresee the likely result. After 7:20, we're going to head to Gisborne to catch up with Kerry Worsnop, who is a passionate advocate for organisations such as 50 Shades of Green, and has her views on how rural communities' concerns have been left out in the cold as the climate change response amendment bill with the emissions trading reform is into its third reading. We're going to cruise down to Hawke's Bay after that at 7:30 to check in on the decline in breeding ewes and the worrying 30% decline in those scanning results, which is going to mount in a smaller lamb crop this spring.
But with a tinge of rain and a dumping of snow, the lambs are pouring out to fetch those dollars from the rails in Fielding and Temuka. Agrihq analyst Suz Bremner is going to join us to bring us more on the store market. To close the show, Professor Richard McDowell, the Chief Scientist for our Land and Water, is going to give us his thoughts on his research that has found globally phosphorus is a much greater problem than nitrogen, and how New Zealand's dual nutrient approach is the right way to improve the quality of our rivers. But first up, following the terrible on-farm tragedy on Sunday, we are going to be joined after this break by Jo Pugh from WorkSafe. This is Sarah's Country. Well, on Sunday, families in Agrihq's lives were torn apart with the sad, tragic farm accident involving a grandmother and her 2 grandchildren. As we approach winter, I found it appropriate to have a discussion with WorkSafe just to see how far we have come in our attention to this terrible problem of farm accidents. Of course, as we head into the winter, we have shorter days and a lot more hazards around the farm with wet weather and a lot more things to think about. In particular, a lot of new people coming into the industry unfamiliar with these hazards around our farm. So welcome tonight's to Sarah's Country, the Head of General Inspectorate, Jo Pugh from WorkSafe. Good evening, Jo.
Good evening, kia ora.
So you've been in the role quite some time now with WorkSafe, and farm accidents and of course we must mention things like forestry are right up there in terms of our most riskiest industries here in New Zealand. Have you seen a general trend in a positive or negative way with the amount of accidents?
I've definitely seen quite a big difference in terms of the culture and the attitude towards health and safety, but what we're not seeing is that change in our, that sad change in our statistics. So every week we have about 1,000 people injured and off work, and then every year 20 people are still dying in agriculture. And it's a real shame when we produce the best produce in the world, we can't seem to be able to produce that without people dying.
So you're talking there about culture. Health and safety is more than box ticking, and I certainly in the last 5 years have seen a culture change to us all wanting to get everybody home safe. The tremendous work that WorkSafe has put into this could contribute to that, yes?
Oh, I'd like to think so, but actually, there's a combination of factors that have led to that, including the amazing work that's been done by federated farmers, beef and lamb, dairy, and NZ, the meat industry, and then also individual farmers taking some responsibility there. It's one of those things that I've been finding in the 18 years that I've been in this industry. People still have this idea that health and safety is about box ticking, it's about compliance, it's about documentation, when it's not. It's really simple. It's actually about caring for your workers and wanting them to come home safe at the end of the day. And when you put that first in your business, you will find they will improve your business and the quality of the work that they're doing, and they will come home safe at the end of the day. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, of course. And we're going into calving, Jo, and there's a lot of wet conditions and shorter days, so it naturally makes you tired as well as, of course, the physical work of calving. Is it, it's time to take stock and appreciate some of those key things to look after yourself and others' well-being on the farm?
Absolutely. I think if anyone actually takes a bit of time to think about what are the hazards and the risks that they're facing, that's going to be time well spent. When you think about what's happening now, we have a pile of new people entering the industry that haven't entered before, being forced into that because of redundancies. We've got people that we've got a lot more local people rather than immigrants coming in with experience. So we've got that happening. We've got winter happening, which has brought in a whole range of new hazards and risks that we have to face. And then on top of that, it's really horrible and cold and wet, and people are quite likely to rush things so that they can get back home and be more comfortable. So it's a total amalgamation of different risks and hazards that lead to some of the high injury rates that we see happening, and particularly now. In fact, calving's a time when injuries in dairy double at that period of time for those reasons.
As a regulator, WorkSafe has the ability to come in and bring in regulation. I know in Australia, Jo, they've been very big on life protectors and roll bars on quad bikes, and we haven't seemed to have followed suit as strongly and as strictly because vehicles are a huge part of a lot of these accidents.
Most of the vehicles, probably about between 70 and 90% of our fatalities are vehicle related, particularly on farms. So they are really important. So actually there's two key things that you could do right now that would halve our fatality rate. Firstly, putting a CPD or a crush prediction device on your quad bike, that would make a significant difference. And wear your seatbelt. And when I say wear your seatbelt, I mean whether that's in your ute or your tractor or in your side-by-side. If you were to do those two things, this country would halve the fatality rate in agriculture at the moment. So there are regulations that refer to that, and definitely we are starting to. Yes, we're encouraging really strongly, and then. If we don't see that buy-in by industry, we will start to ensure compliance.
Okay. And another thing, Jo, we obviously saw this with the trampers down in the South Island, but I've seen an increase in personal locator beacons on farms being a huge part of day-to-day life now, and those abilities to get people to those accidents faster.
Absolutely, they're a really, really, really useful tool. In fact, my inspectors have locator beacons as well, so it's something that we use because we find ourselves often in the same, similar kind of areas. So I think it's one useful control. What it will do is not necessarily stop an accident from happening, but if you have had an accident, it'll get people to you a lot faster, and that's definitely something we find. When a farmer has their accident on a quad bike, it's generally not, it's not known that they're missing for hours and hours afterwards, and by then it's too late. So it's definitely a useful tool, one of the controls.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Head of the General Inspectorate for WorkSafe, Jo Pugh, who's very experienced in this space, and those clear messages going into winter. Joel, could you turn my mic on? That wouldn't happen in a live music environment, Joel, would it? You wouldn't have your mic turned off. Now, I'm loving the comments coming in. I knew music would get you going. And straight off the bat, an old mate, Cam Scott, comes sliding into the comments, screaming the branding. Hashtag bring back the branding, Cam. And James Reid from the Feelers. I tell you what, Hamish G from the Feelers is my favourite drummer of all time. We've got Riri Farmers Rock from Sandra Matthews, that's up in Gizzy. It sort of brings back how much Hamish Mackay used to go on about Daggy and the Dickheads from Tie Happy. And I'm sure that they were an absolute hit back in the day. Kaylee Bell, Rebecca Well says, saw her at Top Paddock. She was awesome. She is awesome, Rebecca, and doing New Zealand very proud on the country music scene. And Jock's throwing us back in time to John Hoare Grinnell. Got a funny story for you. I had John Hoare come and play at the Luggett Hotel when I was managing it on the advice of one Mr. Patrick McCarthy. And he stayed in the local accommodation in Luggett, and I woke up to two men full of whiskey, and John Hoare was plucking ducks in my lounge. He's one of a kind, John Hoare. And we have some fantastic New Zealand musicians. And I'd like to celebrate because they're having a hell of a hard time with the effects of COVID affecting the entertainment industry, but let's get excited. Hopefully we can have some local concerts, and everybody needs to get in behind. So who is your favourite New Zealand music artist? Please let us know in the comments, because Joel here, he's a bit new to the New Zealand music scene but loves music. He was filming at Rhythm and Vines. Joel, do you remember any of the others that were New Zealand music from Rhythm and Vines you liked?
Oh, there was a great band on one of the smaller stages, and I cannot for the life of me remember their name, but they were, like, I'm more into, like...
Dush Dush.
Yeah, not so much Dush Dush. I'm more into, like, rock and all that kind of stuff, and they were, like, playing completely different stuff from everyone else, which was good fun. And, like, I'll try and find their name.
Do you know, I'm going to show you one duo called Armadella Moore that I think you'll like, from Wanaka. I'd love to know. Please flood in the comments. Who is your New Zealand's favourite? If you could go to a concert this weekend, who is it going to be? Now, up next on Sarah's Country, talking about Gizzy, we're heading there. Kerry Worsnop, she's going to share her views on foresters receiving government-backed guaranteed income, irrespective of their silviculture practices or market prices for wood products. All that coming up on Sarah's Country. This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
Like electric fencing.
Or horse feed.
Or bee suits.
Hellbent.
Chook food.
Do you want a couple of these? Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this. But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help your farm,
Grow, milk, dredge.
Rhea, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce high quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Now, if you've just joined us here on Sarah's Country, tonight we are celebrating New Zealand music, and this is purely, of course, it was New Zealand Music Month in May. We've come into level 1 today, and one area that has been dramatically hit by COVID-19 has been the inability to have gatherings of more than 100 people. I heard on the radio, Joel, there was a rock band performing to 30 people, and they all had to be seated. Imagine that.
Yeah, I saw a nightclub that had a similar thing going on, and it was all these people sitting in rows and just kind of like dancing in their chairs. It was a sight to behold.
It's quite hard to headbang, isn't it, when you're sitting in a chair? I'm trying it now, for those of you who are just listening. And a few of you coming through in the comments, of course, massive 660 fans, Marie Frost and Eric Marklew. And Jock says that Jiva is a big Waratahs fan. They are absolutely fantastic as well. Now, our next guest, I'm sure I will get to shortly in terms of her music tastes. But we are here to talk about the Environmental Select Committee's submitted its recommendations on the proposed ETS reforms at the beginning of May. It found that the introduction of a price floor for New Zealand units of $20 and a price ceiling of $50 was appropriate, and that the bill should proceed largely unchanged. This has been in spite of repeated submissions highlighting the potential devastating effects such legislation could have on our rural towns and communities. Now, joining us now is East Coast farmer Kerry Worsnop, who has been following the government's obsession with planting out our food-producing farmland and trees. Kerry, firstly, can you give us some context in where the amendment bill currently is before Parliament and what this will mean for New Zealand farmland from your perspective?
Yeah, so as you said, a lot of this legislation continued to move through the lockdown while we were essentially all being blinded by COVID. And it was quite a shock to me to see that report released from the Select Committee. It was really quite a big surprise to see just how much progress had been made while we were all kind of looking the other way. And since that report was released, the speed of progress has only increased, so that the second reading of the bill has taken place. It has also progressed to the Committee of the Whole House, and so far as I can tell on the parliamentary website, it is yet to pass its third reading, but given it's passed everything else, it seems fairly obvious that it will be passed into law, which in terms of ramifications for farming, they're quite massive, and I would really caution anybody, do not underestimate the scale of this.
You've said that the government is just hell-bent on their own particular outcome and absolutely have the blinkers on when it comes to the reality of market forces and the impact on rural communities. What do you believe they're trying to achieve by, as you said, bulldozing their way through this under COVID?
I think in many ways they've kind of boxed themselves into a corner. They've told the whole country and really the world that we are going to lead and that we're going to do it using essentially the Net Zero Carbon Act, and that we're going to measure up to the Paris Accord. And so when you've got a 3-year election cycle, you actually don't have a lot of time. And I think probably that's one of the most obvious things I would say in the passing of this law is that they haven't given themselves enough time to come up with a good one. So we've got a very expedient means of meeting our commitments. And in order for our country to do that, we're essentially going to hand provincial New Zealand to the forest sector. We're not genuinely bringing about the kinds of changes that the bill was meant to bring about, which was to change people's behaviour, so to change businesses' behaviour. And really what it does instead of that is it provides certainty of being able to offset, really. And I think the appetite for offsetting is going to be enormous because the relative comparison between changing, for example, Air New Zealand does not have the capacity to put a 20 or 50 tonne battery in an airplane and just change its business model tomorrow. It doesn't have a choice. It has to use fossil fuel. And we have a whole swag of other industries that are equally reliant on a model that is going to have to pay for its liability. And the only way we can essentially pay for those liabilities is by planting farmland. There's no other way.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I could hear through my head those words reduce, reuse, recycle. We sort of forget about the first word, which is reduce. It's been replaced with offset, hasn't it? Now, we've got companies emerging that claim that they are in the best interests of New Zealand owned, such as dryland carbon farming. What's your thoughts on these syndicates that are effectively making the most of this, the price of these units?
I think it's smart. That's probably the first thing I'd say, because there's relatively, well, there isn't, to my knowledge, any other industry anywhere in New Zealand where somebody will guarantee you a minimum of what you're going to earn. You can't lose money. Why wouldn't you invest in it? So very shrewd on their part. Also, probably the potential was there to make the likes of Dryland Carbon and the New Zealand Carbon Farming Company, to make them actually achieve something good for our country. The lack of controls around the ETS means that they can essentially take the easiest route and plant whatever they can buy in pine trees, because that will sequester carbon the fastest. We could have had immense biodiversity benefits. We could have had, we could have had the restoration of waterways that farmers are really struggling to restore from their own funds. The opportunity in this was huge, and it was just kicked down the road basically. And instead, we're going to take an expedient road that's going to leave us with enormous costs to carry. Our children and our grandchildren will pay for this fully.
You've stated in the piece that you've sent to me that there is so many lessons from the past in the 80s. Could you explain what we're not listening to history on?
So farming has probably the most pertinent advice that the forestry industry could possibly want at this time, and that is, if you look back, when the government dangles a carrot in front of your nose, you should be suspicious. Because ultimately, the thing that governs the success of an industry is never government policy. It's the market. It's who wants your product, what kind of product do they want, and what are they prepared to pay for it. The ETS is completely disjointed from that. It does not marry up in any way, shape or form what we will be growing in our forests with what forests will be paid. Under a $35 carbon price, most foresters will be making as much from carbon as they will be from the trees. Now, tell me that you're going to bother with the silvicultural regimes that result in a really strong forestry industry. We are essentially driving the forestry industry down the same road that the 70s took farming down, where we ate every single blade of grass on every one of our farms. Droughts were horrifying to live through, and frankly, we didn't meet the expectations of our market. It didn't end well, and I think you'd be blind not to say that we're essentially heading down the same track. We're not doing the forest industry any favours, and ultimately, this kind of market distortion will hurt not only farming but forestry as well.
It does concern me when you've pointed out to me that there was the submissions that have been ignored from the devastating effects on our rural communities. For those who are watching, could you explain firstly what you've seen not only now but in the past on what it's done to Gisborne communities?
Yeah, look, I guess that the thing that really keeps me awake at night is that myself, and there's a lot of people like me who have plowed countless hours and days and weeks and months into trying to highlight just how badly this will affect our community. And it's really quite gut-wrenching to see the fact that I trawled through all of the associated reports and different things that the select committee requested information on, and I couldn't find anything anywhere where they actually delved into and asked questions about how this would affect our community. those submissions were largely or entirely ignored because it's inconvenient. If you take into consideration the fact that rural communities will suffer for this, it suddenly puts a question mark over the whole scheme, which I don't think anybody was prepared to do. There's been a very slight concession in the bill where they say that the commission, the Climate Commission, can determine if too much forestry is happening. But there's absolutely no guidance as to what that threshold would look like. Does it have to be a whole region? Does it have to be half a region? And given that the commission is appointed by the government, it makes a little bit of a mockery of the independence of it.
What do you make of this particular coalition government and the multiple agendas at play, Kerry? Because you have a climate minister, James Shaw, with an agenda. You have Shane Jones in regional development with his hand in the forestry pocket. You have Eugenie Sage with conservation and her lack of appetite for overseas investment into our land, foreign ownership. You have a trade minister who also wears an environment minister hat, and an agricultural minister who seems to be very quiet.
Quiet's an understatement. I think, and to be honest, I thought this right from the outset, it's the perfect storm. And exactly that. You've had essentially we've got policies upon policies upon policies that have collided with each other to result in probably, if it's all borne out, which really this just needs a substantive government, the seal, we're talking about probably the biggest changes that we've seen since the 80s. The 80s was more or less, we brought it on ourselves to a certain extent by taking those subsidies and running with it. This, really, is a totally different kettle of fish. Somebody somewhere has deemed that we're no longer necessary as an industry, that quite frankly, we're not as efficient as the forest sector when it comes to meeting, I guess, all the targets that they've set for themselves. But if you look at COVID, it was a really, really graphic example of just what it is that people do value first and foremost. And forestry was shut down as non-essential. Farming, we still had to feed people. I think there's no question about it. We've got a big battle ahead of us in terms of elevating just what provincial and rural New Zealand has to offer our country. We've been too quiet, and maybe we need to share that story a little bit more. But that's probably the biggest and most critical thing I would say to farmers. Stand up, be proud.
Standing up on the steps of Parliament certainly got under the collar of One New Zealand First Minister. When I talked to him as we pivoted into this live show, Kerry, he went, "Oh, no. Farmers, no, I was just joking. We love farmers. We need farmers. If I rang up tomorrow and said, Shane, I want you on the show," which I think I'm going to, what would you like me to ask him?
I would say, are you genuinely a regional economic development minister? Because if you are, you're supposed to have our back.
I'm going to ask him just that, Kerry. Thank you so much. Tune in tomorrow at Sarah's Country. Before I let you go, though, Kerry, I know that you love supporting local music. And Gizzy, we've been talking about Gizzy with Rhythm and Vines. Joel was there this New Year's Eve. But what is your favourite Kiwi artist that you love?
I have to say I've been done the rounds in Gizzy quite a bit, but in my younger days it was shepherding. We had Long to Catch a Fire.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got pretty good memories from that, yeah.
Oh, when you go to a Catch Fire concert, there's like a certain style of movement that you can't break out of. Eh?
Totally. That's yeah, definitely matched up with the old Gizzy vibe.
And a certain smell as well.
Good quietly.
Yeah. Hey, awesome. Thank you so much, Kerry Worsnop, for joining us, and I absolutely loved getting into that with you. Now, after the break, we're going to talk about the effects of sheep and beef properties being converted to forestry and the impact on our declining breeding ewe numbers, coupled with drought, and we're going to see even more of a declining lamb crop this spring. All that with Agrihq analyst Suz Bremner. This is Sarah's Country.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. You reckon it'll come out? Cover it and talcum powder to leave it 10 minutes. You'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Well, a season of drought, ongoing forestry conversions on the East Coast, and simply easier cash flow in trading lambs than running breeding ewes has had a significant dent on our overall national ewe flock. Joining us now is senior sheep and beef analyst Suz Bremner from Agrihq. Good evening out of Hawke's Bay, Suz.
Good evening, Sarah. Thanks for having me again.
Have you had some rain since last time we talked?
Oh, well, it was a while ago that we talked, so you'd hope so. Otherwise, we'd be in serious strife. But we did. We got, I think it was about a week and a half ago, we got 60 mil, which really threw us a lifeline.
That's good, and may it continue, even though we're going into the cooler weathers. Now, let's start off with this record at Temuka yesterday, 11,000 lambs through the Temuka sale yards. How did it go, and what sort of led to such large numbers?
Yeah, so that's a record June price in our Agrihq data. That's store lambs. This time last year, or end of May, they had about 12,500. That was their record level of store land that they've had. And what is really driving that, and I had some really interesting conversations today with a couple of agents down there, they basically said that a whiff of winter brings out the lambs. And so the lambs that we saw came from Central Otago and Tekapō. And they are annual draft lines, but it's not like everyone gets together and goes, oh, let's target this particular Monday sale. It really is when that snow gets on those hills down there. If you'd probably know better than I would that the high country farmers, they need to focus more on their breeding stock, and so they ship their lambs off. Obviously, it's not finishing country, and they need to get those lambs down to the lower country. So yesterday at Temuka, there was 11,500. 2,800 of those were one consignment from Tekapō. And yeah, they had a great day. Lots of optimism in the market. Those lambs always bring out the regular buyers that will take them down onto the lowlands. And because a lot of those lambs probably haven't really seen a nice lush blade of green grass, they certainly get down onto the lower country and finish really well. And the high volume as well just brought the buyers in.
Yeah, hopefully it dries out for the feet of those merinos. Now, we opened up talking about breeding ewes. We're going to come back to lambs. We're just jumping around all over the show. However, early scanning results in the North Island are leading to this decline over time of our breeding ewe flock, which is worrying, and a lot of people just getting sick of, obviously, the admin of having ewes.
We've certainly moved from a country where we were known for our high numbers of ewes. So last year, beef and lamb, June 2019, breeding ewe flock was 26.7 million. I would be putting my money on it being lower. Obviously, we haven't got to end of June yet, so we don't have those figures, but you're sort of looking at three factors that are influencing that market, or the numbers, sorry. And as you mentioned before, we're still seeing the forestry conversion. A year ago, the billion trees policy was introduced, and lots of land then, breeding new land then was sold, and the ewes were sold, to follow on from that. That's still going on now, and just recently we've heard, particularly sort of around Hawke's Bay and some of the bigger country, more of these farms, these big high country farms that basically run a lot of breeding ewes, they have been sold for forestry as well. So there is that factor influencing it. Of course, drought in many areas has meant that the farmers have sort of culled out the bottom end of their breeding ewes that they wouldn't generally be putting to the processors, but they're left with very little choice to do that, to be able to look after what they keep on farms. And then there is almost a generational shift to away from the breeding ewes and into fattening lambs. It's a lot easier time management. There's not so many factors such as your lambing and unproductive time. So, yeah, it's a real shame. As I say, we'll know June 2020, end of this month, what those breeding ewe numbers are looking like.
And so what are ewes fetching through the yards?
So what we've seen coming through, we have seen a lot of early standard lambs starting to trickle in, mainly through Hawke's Bay and that because of the drought. But it is, at this time of year, we do see quite a few. One thing that I have noted is that we've seen a lot more run with ram lines. So they're lines that have been to the ram, they may well still have the ram with them, or they just simply haven't been scanned. Of course, scanning is an extra cost for farmers, and if their intention is to sell those ewes or they have to sell them, then they don't really want to have that extra cost. But what I am definitely seeing in the yards is a preference for scanned lines. And so while farmers haven't got the cost of the scanning, they may be hurting themselves in the pocket by those ewes not making as much as they would if they were scanned. So at the moment, our scanning results haven't been great. The dry has affected, I'm just talking North Island obviously because it's too early for the South Island. We would generally look at around 170 to 180% being an average scanning. We're looking at about 150 to 160% is quite common. And as you said earlier on, buddy that up with lower ewe numbers and we're not looking at a huge lamb crop, but we're getting a lot of medium condition ewes coming through, so they're sort of making around $130 to $160. Anything that is bigger, heavier ewes, younger, or even your 4 and 5 year olds, but the ones in good condition that are multiple scanned and a high scanning, around that 170 to 180, they have been getting up to around $200, which is great to see. Whether that will be maintained through the main flock, time will tell.
So what about these traders feeding lambs back into the market that they did intend on wintering?
Yeah, so at this time of year when we see a bit of a lift in the store lamb values, and we do have to remember that we did have lockdown when it wasn't easy trading through that. We've seen a high volume of lambs coming through, which is drawing a lot of buyers in. We've had the rain, which has really had a significant impact on prices, and with the prices coming up quite nicely. Sometimes there becomes a point where the prices are that good in the store market that we'll actually see traders return lambs to the sale yard. So they may have bought lambs in the paddock, or they may have picked them up at the sale yard. So the telling sign of that is when you get a line of lambs come in that have got different earmarks through it. So you know that they've been picked up from a number of different properties combined in, and then probably the top's drafted off and gone to the processors, and then we'll see some of the others coming in. But we are still seeing lambs, one earmark lines from properties. Since lockdown, fielding has sold 55,000 lambs through these yards, and I think that's over 4 sales. So we're seeing massive volumes come out, but the prices they're holding up really, really well. So we're seeing heavy males in the North Island are around $120 to $135, and good medium to good ewe lambs are sort of $75 to $105. At Temuka, those lambs that we talked about earlier, the heavy crypt orchids of those lines are $125 to $142, and medium good six for $91 to $115. So you can sort of see why people might think, well, why not?
So is the lamb schedule driving a lot of the store market?
Oh, absolutely. So at this time of year, we see that schedule start to creep up as the supply dwindles heading into the processors. But what's been great is that a lot of people have been able to finish lambs. Those little, these bits of growth that we've been able to get has meant that people have been able to send lambs off to the processors, get that increase in schedule, and make a really good margin. And it is that margin that a lot of people, talk about. The prices in the yards, we've seen heavy males, making $120 to $135. Ewe lambs in the North Island, $75 to $105. The lambs we were talking about at Temuka, they were $125 to $142 for the top crypt orchids, while the medium good mixed sticks were $91 to $115. So you can see that they're certainly not losing out sending lambs to the store sale. And a very wise person, Hawke's Bay farmer called Peter Todd, said to me, if the prices are right, there will always be the lambs. So he's not expecting the volume to drop away anytime soon.
And Suz, farmers wonder why they are price takers and not market makers, right? But it is the nature of our industry.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Suz Bremner, for joining us for Agrihq. She's a senior sheep and beef analyst, and really enjoy reading Suz's pieces over the rails. You'll see that in the Farmers Weekly every week, and you can catch them online, Agrihq. Check them out and subscribe to those fantastic livestock insight reports so you know exactly what's going on right at your fingertips. Now, coming up to close the show, we're going to be joined by Professor Richard McDowell from our Land and Water right here in Lincoln, and a global first, another one for Lincoln, following last night. It's the first global analysis of freshwater quality that has been published in a scientific journal. We're going to get Professor Richard's thoughts on this essential freshwater policy. This is Sarah's Country.
Everyone's been talking about food these days.
While we've been busy stacking shelves, there's a whole team behind us.
But it's hard work too.
And we don't grow it without help.
Nutritious food needs nutrients. Our soil tells us that story.
By testing, we know what the soil needs.
We make the nutrients right here in New Zealand.
And we've got it
when you need it.
And we get it to where it needs to go.
As farmers, we have a really important role in turning sunshine and water and nutrients into an edible product, and we don't take that lightly.
It's great to know we're putting food on the New Zealand dinner table.
So we can all come together.
We've got to play our part in keeping the farmers growing what they grow, whether it be grass or fruit and vegetables.
Pleased to be part of the production line that keeps the industry moving and keeps people being fed.
I have been speaking to a farmer and they appreciate what we're doing.
They're really happy that at this critical time of the year for their autumn applications, our stores and supply networks have stayed open.
You're proud and privileged to be part of the team.
Thanks for the hard work, team. Let's dig in. And let's do it all again tomorrow. Cheers.
Now, algae growth in rivers is a problem worldwide, affecting the water used by at least 2 billion people for food, work and recreation. Our Land and Water Chief Scientist, Professor Richard McDowell, is the lead author of a paper just recently published in Nature's Scientific Reports. Then it provides the first global analysis of freshwater quality, and he joins us now. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Sarah. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us from literally across town. Rich, firstly, can you please set the context for our audience of why phosphorus is a bigger problem than nitrogen and the New Zealand situation compared to global waterways?
Sure. I mean, I guess the first thing we've got to recognise that algal growth is stimulated by both nitrogen and phosphorus. It's a bit like applying superphosphate or urea onto your pastures. They need both to grow, and the same occurs in rivers. But it's the amount of both of those that are meaningful in terms of algal growth. So we've done a study that's looked at 6,000 catchments around the world, and it's tallied up the quantity of both nitrogen and phosphorus and how much of those ratios come into waterways. And when you look at that, and you can see the relationship is stronger when it's controlled more by phosphorus. Now that's internationally, and as you outlined, there's 1.7 billion people who are affected by waterways that have algal growth stimulated by phosphorus, and another 280 million by nitrogen. Now, in New Zealand, obviously our waterways are reasonably cleaner than many overseas, but still, phosphorus plays an important role. And in our waterways, it's more common for phosphorus to limit, i.e. to control, I guess, algal growth than it is for nitrogen. But both have to be managed.
Okay, so under the Action for Healthy Waterways policy announcement that's come out, Richard, the particular N has been the biggest focus here. Are you saying that we're not putting enough attention on phosphorus use and runoff into our waterways?
Well, it was both, what they said, dissolved inorganic nitrogen and dissolved reactive phosphorus were both included within the policy. They've been not shelved, but they've been taken out to be re-examined in another 12 months. But the focus in the meantime has been on the toxicity limit for nitrogen, which has been brought down to, I think, about 2.4 milligrams per litre. Now, that doesn't necessarily relate to the algal growth side of it, which is what they're going to be addressing in another 12 months.
Right, so we've got more to come in the space. I'd like to understand about mitigation, and it's either got to be at an output level or an input level. What do you believe the right tools are in managing our effect on our waterways?
Well, we've got a long history with output-focused policy, and I kind of have faith that works, especially when folk are reasonably adaptable and flexible and want to do the right thing. And I'm optimistic that that's the case here. Many cases overseas, though, it's input controls, and we've seen that kind of sneak in now. And the term I think the minister is used, and indeed it's in the cabinet paper, is the last chance saloon, and that's where that 190 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare in terms of synthetic N has come in. Is that going to work compared to output? The jury's out. Some folk think that is. I like to think that if you can measure and model what you're doing on your property, you can manage it well. Hence, output focused.
Yeah, we had Mike Manning on from Ravensdown on Serious Country last night, Rich, and of course the fertiliser industry is most upset around the lack of consultation around these inputs. We've seen a huge growth in the use of nitrogen on our farms since the early 1990s. Do you, in all of your studies and seeing ways that we can drop this amount of usage, some profitable farms in your research?
Yeah, so obviously Mike might have mentioned the work that's been going on at Lincoln here in terms of the University Dairy Farm. Obviously a very profitable operation that uses less than that 190. But there are, that's just one case in Canterbury, albeit a leading light, and can be used by many others in the region. There are there are lots of other, I guess, adaptations and or mitigations that enable us to get down to levels of losses that mean that they are within the current policy. And the way to do that is probably better with the farm plans, and that's been quite an encouraging piece of policy that has been announced. I say encouraging because it was first proffered by the primary sectors themselves.
And not every regional council has progressed with the strict and sort of introduction of farm environment plans, and Canterbury, I know, has been one of the forefathers of that. Do you believe that our regional councils are set up to create the individualised understanding of the uniqueness of those, not only those catchments, but the climates of those different regions, to be able to make sure that farming continues and not just a blanket national standards approach?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the first step in this is to signal that it's needed. You need farm plans in order to make progress. Then you need some standardisation of those plans to ensure that they're robust. They're not off the back of an envelope. We like to work in a quantitative world, so they need to be measurable. They need to relate to maps, and they need therefore to be audible, to show that the actions that you're taking on your property are leading to the right outcomes, for example, in water. Now there's a big caveat here, and that's around capacity, though. And the intent here is to have everyone across the country, irrespective of which council they're in, have a farm environment plan that's up to scratch. Now, of course, with there being 40,000 farms, there's going to be quite a few to do amongst the 200 people who are currently qualified. But that's a market opportunity, an opportunity I think our primary sectors are gearing up to fill.
Yes, and I know that Beef and Lamb have set some ambitious targets, and 2021's not very far away, Rich. We've just been speaking to Kerry Worsnop on the topic of carbon sequestration through the government's obsession with forestry. You have come out saying that water quality needs to work in with the Zero Carbon Act. Otherwise, it is, of course, agnostic in its approach. But could you explain around why the planting of trees has an effect on water quality?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is one thing that not only I, but many of the farmers I deal with want is certainty. And if you've got two pieces of advice, one coming at you for to reducing your carbon footprint, another one wanting to look at reducing your water quality footprint, and if they have mitigations that are somewhat antagonistic, i.e. go against one another, you end up not having either of those outcomes achieved. Now, forestry, if you put it in the wrong place, can end up doing that. For example, it can dry up a stream and therefore concentrate some of those contaminants. So that's why we see a great opportunity here to not only integrate the mitigations that we use for water quality, but also with greenhouse gases and potentially other things as well, like biodiversity or even radically profit.
Oh dear, no, not that. Of course, having market driving the incentive to do good would be terrible, Rich. But
I think it would be absolutely fantastic.
Hey, thank you so much for everything that you do in your role as Chief Scientist at Our Land and Water, which of course I know you wear an ag research hat and have done for many, many years. To close the show, I would like to talk about your favourite band. I know you were just telling me in the break that you've been at Dunedinite for many years. It's a good music scene. Any recommendations on New Zealand music that you'll be listening to support these local artists?
I'm an old fan of Martin Phillips and the Chills, but my most recent Dunedin band that I've come across and like immensely are Soaked Oats, a group of lads from I think the north side of Dunedin, students, producing some quite nice tunes.
Wonderful. Well, we're having a bit of soaked oats as the winter gets a bit colder and we get the porridge out. Right. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Serious Country. That's Professor Richard McDowell there from Our Land and Water. Thank you so much to all of you for tuning in tonight. I just want to read out a few of these comments because you've been very engaged audience tonight. Before I get into some of these comments, Sandra Matthews has said you only have to visit north of Gisborne to see the negative effect blanket planting has had. Unemployment, lower socio-economic struggles, along with dangerous roading, damage from slash, all not regulated, generations separated due to no work opportunities, the list goes on. Sandra, absolutely 100%, and feel for the East Coast community with the fear and uncertainty going on. And Michael Ross says forestry looks like it is basing itself on false economies. Imagine if the carbon credit regime changed downwards. Exactly right, Michael. Celebrating tonight, your favourite New Zealand music artists, East Coast Farming Expo. I know there'll be Sue Wilson. She said Dave Dobbin, of course. 2 sellout concerts in Wairoa. I'd love to go to a Catch a Fire concert in Wairoa. Right, I'm adding that to my bucket list. And, of course, I have left the last comment, which goes to Joanne Elizabeth Rock, who has just informed me that Joel Rock is a good guitarist and used to be in a band. You haven't told me this yet.
There's reasons I haven't told you that yet.
Why were you not that good?
I used to be good. I used to teach guitar, but not anymore. I kind of stopped that a wee while ago anyway.
Look, your brother's been on the road with the Jonas Brothers, and you're here stuck in New Zealand working for me. What went wrong?
Oh, I don't know. Let's not get into that on the show.
Sorry. Desperate times call for desperate measures. What was the name of the band, Joel?
Oh, it's a great one for a band that lasted about 3 months. We were called Built to Last. Somewhat like the Titanic that also came from Belfast. Built to last, strongest ship in.
And that's why Irish people are really, really funny people, aren't they? What a great way to end tonight's show. Thank you for joining us at Serious Country. If you've been listening to us on demand on podcast, give us a subscribe to ensure that you get those episodes automatically downloaded. If you've been listening live, good on you. Thank you. And give us a wee share and tell your mates if you've been enjoying Serious Country. It'd be quite nice to grow the audience. It is continuously growing. And of course, but the best thing about Serious Country is it's the right people at the table watching. And that's what I love and gets me out of bed every single day. And of course, thank you so much to the wonderful team at Farmers Weekly. I would not be able to produce a show like this every single night without the in-depth decades of knowledge from their experienced agri-journalists and analysts. So if you want to check out any of the show on demand, head to Farmers Weekly's YouTube channel as well. And get in touch with us, sarah@periummedia.com. Good night. I'd love to say good night and go well. And I'd love you to turn up the beats for some local sound tonight and into the weekend. Thank you for joining us. Cheers.
This is Serious Country.